Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Redefine Your Life. Today's episode is a deep dive into holistic nutrition and specifically what I've been learning in my integrative nutrition program, which focuses on food being the medicine that we can use to enable our bodies to heal and how our bodies work down to a mechanical and a chemical level. But before we get into the episode, I just wanted to take a few moments to share how my experience with integrating what I've learned in my program has had an impact on my life and the challenges that I faced in trying to apply some of these concepts to my own life. I don't want to call them like diets, but it's kind of like a trial to see if you have food allergies and to see if you're sensitive to certain foods and to try to kind of hone in on what foods are triggers for your digestion and for yourself. And let me tell you, I have learned a whole lot about my body and the foods that trigger me in the past couple of weeks. And one of my biggest challenges was getting rid of foods that I love. And previous to starting this trying out this elimination diet, I believe in eating in moderation. And I feel that when you limit yourself to certain foods, it can have psychological implications. So typically, I'll eat when I'm hungry and I'll eat what calls to me, and I'll try to focus on eating a variety of fresh source fruits and vegetables. And up until last year, I was actually a vegetarian and almost even a vegan because I really don't consume a lot of dairy products. But I used to eat cheese a whole lot and stuff like that. But I never would consider myself one to diet and instead focused on how food made me feel and eating the foods that I felt made me feel the best. And I still feel, even after doing this sort of trial diet, that is true to be the most beneficial diet for most people, because I feel like when you listen to your body and what your body likes and what your body doesn't like, then you're best enabling your body to function at its best. Some of the challenges that I faced during this trial diet was feeling like there was just like nothing I could eat. Like I already ate so many fruits and vegetables, and cutting out eggs and cutting out grains was a challenge for me because I consider those to be pretty big. I don't want to say calorie things for me, but they have a lot of carbs, and like eggs for me was like a big source of protein and fat. And cutting it out of my diet for 3 weeks was a really big challenge. And then the other one that was a big challenge for me was caffeine. Because I know we all can maybe relate if you're also love caffeine. I just love the flavor of coffee. I love tea. Like I just love different warm beverages. And there's a certain sort of comfort, I think, for me that comes from those beverages, especially working in the hospital, being up either at the butt crack of dawn or staying up all night. If I worked night shift or day shift, regardless, I would typically have some sort of caffeine. And, when I work out, I typically will take like a dry scoop of pre-workout or some sort of pre-workout, and that has caffeine in it. So during the course of my elimination diet, I wasn't consuming, or I was trying to minimally consume, really wean back on some of those caffeinated products. And I was definitely going through withdrawal. Like there was a time where I was really depressed. One of the mornings I woke up and I was like, I don't know if it's because I like was a couple days into my like period cycle, or if it was a combination of a bunch of things, but I felt the withdrawal to a point where, not eating cheese and not eating these certain things that I've learned have chemical attachments to your brain. So we're literally dependent. And, something like caffeine we know is addictive, right? Because you've heard of like caffeine headaches and different things like that. But it's different when you hear about it versus when you actually feel it. And it was just like a really rough couple of weeks. So after doing it, I'm glad that I did it. And I'm glad that I now know and I have a better awareness of what foods are triggers for me and how sensitive I am to some of these foods, and definitely how sensitive I am to caffeine. And I'm glad that now I have this awareness and I can reflect on the different foods that are triggers for me and move forward in my life with continuing the moderation diet that I previously have been using for years and has been working successfully to keep me at a steady weight and keep me happy and building a very good relationship with food where I love to eat and I'm not like feeling guilty about anything that I eat or feeling like, any sort of psychological implications of food, which in the past I had struggled with. So definitely were some big challenges and also a lot of hard lessons to learn and to really accept. But all in all, brought a really great awareness to how food can be fuel. It can either boost you up or it can tear you down. And hopefully after, you watch the rest of the episode, it'll bring an awareness for you to also apply some of this knowledge and some of these different tactics to see if you also have food intolerances, allergies, or possible triggers, and maybe help you bring an awareness to what foods and you should be avoiding or shouldn't be avoiding, or how to balance out your nutrition in a way that best serves you. Because let's be real, we're all different. We all have different history of what we have eaten and what we like to eat, what we're emotionally attached to, what we're addicted to. It's going to vary person to person. So maybe take each of the things that I speak about and reflect on how they apply to you. And thank you guys again so much for being here, and let us know if you have any questions about the episode or if you want us to follow up, or any follow-up questions you might have that you want me to dive deeper into.
Well, thank you, Julia. I'm so excited for you to teach us today.
Yeah, so I just wanted to start by disclosing, like, this is not medical advice. This is not, I'm not a doctor. It is formal training that I'm undergoing, but I'm still a student. So still learning, as we all really are students forever and ever. So
Julia is a nurse, though. She does know what she's talking about.
But, I just want to also reiterate that you are ultimately the person who knows best what your body needs or doesn't need. So even though as a medical professional, I might think I know, or we might think we know from the medical standpoint what is going on 100% with another person, truly the person is the only one who has lived the entire experience in that body and knows what their body, how their body reacts to certain things and what is good for them and what's not good for them, based on how good they feel when they do certain things, or not how not good they feel when they do certain things. So
Right.
I just wanted, yeah, right. I just wanted to start by giving a little bit of an overview about kind of like the gut and what really makes up, like, we're going to take a little Osmosis Jones approach here and like deep dive in and take a look. Digestion starts in the mouth. And obviously we know that because, that's where food enters. And it was just how important it is for how long it takes you to eat. So first of all, like, you shouldn't be just scarfing down your food, not just because, it's like stressful for your body to take in the food so quickly. And so it actually helps with absorption if you chew your food almost like seeming like too much. And the more you can digest and break down your food with your mouth, and the enzymes in your mouth are really what's important for the start of digestion of food. So when you're chewing the food, right? So if you ever been like, oh, I see like my food is whole when it comes out the next day or whatever, you notice like there's still whole pieces of food. Well, that should be telling you that you're not taking enough time. That can be a clear sign that you're not taking enough time to chew your food efficiently. Because if you can break down majority of it, mechanically in your mouth, it's going to help with absorption. It's going to help with stomach upset, because when the food gets to your stomach, it then has to churn and churn and churn. What we know about, if you know anything about the stomach, it's just that it's the first place to hold the food for us, to secrete the enzymes and the acid and everything to start breaking down the food. But really, like, it needs to be mechanically, physically broken down to start that digestion.
Makes
right?
sense. I always knew that eating fast would give you a stomach ache, but I never knew why exactly that happened.
Yeah, because you're overwhelming your belly. If you care about your stomach and you care about the food you're eating, and even more so, if you're going to take the time to eat good foods like fruits and vegetables and naturally made foods, and try to cut out the processed stuff and try to cut out as much of the artificial things as you can, and you try to live a more like holistic, whole food type of diet, then it's also important. It's just as important to eat those good foods as it is to actually chew those foods and make sure you're breaking them down and taking the time to eat. Because if you're stressed out when you eat, it's also telling your body to metabolize the food in a stressed out way.
Mm,
So it's
mm-hmm.
kind of like, if you're stressed at work and you're eating, like, I'm just saying this because this happens to me, when I'm stressed out at work and I'm trying to eat, I have to actually like take a bite of food, and I'll be so hungry sometimes that I don't want to do this, but I'll take a bite of food and then I'll put the fork down and I'll take a moment and I'll take a couple deep breaths and I'll just like fully just like taste the food that first bite and just like chew it and like chew it almost like a ridiculous amount of time. Like seems so ridiculous, but that's starting to tell your body, oh, oh, we're starting to eat. Oh, this is good. Oh, welcome food. Thank you for joining us. Like
Enjoy your food, people.
yeah, like really like, so even if you're in a high stress environment, you can kind of take that first minute to chew your first bite and almost like give your food some like appreciation too. Like, thank you, food, like, yum, like, this is good. This is going to fuel my body. And you're kind of mentally aligning with your mental brain, your brain up here with the brain that is in your gut. You have your brain up here, which tells you like, oh, I want food. And like, that's connected to your olfactory system. So your nose, your smells. So smells are actually, this is some fun fact I learned from the other book that I'm reading about fungus. There's like, your nose can smell like 7 billion smells versus your mouth can actually only taste like, I think it's what, like 5 million tastes. And your eyes,
What?
yeah, like your eyes can see, um, your nose is actually the most sensitive to all those things. So when they say like, oh yeah, your food, your digestion kind of starts with your nose,
Hmm.
really, because it's triggering your brain to be like, oh, it's time to eat. So the enzymes in your mouth are pretty important to starting that regulation. We talked about the mechanical, the chewing, how important it is to chew and like get the food to break down into tiny little baby particles. But it's also important to chew your food because the enzymes in your mouth and your salivary glands are only produced in your mouth. So there's specific enzymes that are produced in your mouth, and then there are specific enzymes that are produced in your stomach, and then there are specific enzymes that are released in your small intestine, and so on into your digestive system. So at the start of your digestive system, the start of that metabolic breakdown, it happens in your mouth. And so if you're just chewing your food for a couple seconds and swallowing, you're likely not getting enough of the digestive enzymes from your mouth and your salivary glands. So that's another reason why it's important to really chew your food and really hold it into your, like, take time with the first part of your digestive system, your mouth. And then once you swallow the food, it goes into your belly. And a lot of the research that they talk about in my program is about acid reflux and how so many people
Mm,
have GERD. Like
mm-hmm.
everybody and their mother's got gastroesophageal
Literally.
reflux disease, GERD, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that should be
Can
indicative
you tell them
of,
what that's like, what it's like to experience GERD for people that might not know that that's what it's called?
yeah. So if you're having like, I mean, I feel like we've all experienced some form of reflux. You ever been like eating something and then you can't stop burping and you're like, oh, I'm tasting my food again. Like that's acid reflux. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you feel like you have to keep swallowing, or you feel like you're
Or
constantly having, yeah,
when
go
you
ahead.
bend over and you throw up a little bit, but it's not really throw up.
Like
It's just
we,
acid.
yeah, exactly. So if you've ever had any of those symptoms and you're like, oh yeah, like I have acid reflux, like that, like peppers, my mom used to always say like peppers give her acid reflux because she would constantly, after eating them, she would be finding herself having like symptoms like burping and feeling like the acid was coming back up. So I've heard
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people say that they have that kind of reaction with coffee, and they think that it's like related to the acidity of the food, which it could be, or it could be related to not chewing the food enough, or there's like a dysbiosis going on or an imbalance going on in whatever is going on in your digestive system. So if you're feeling like you have some of those acid symptoms, then this is definitely the episode for you, because we're going to get into pretty much every cause or possible cause of acid reflux and GERD. And then we're also going to get into how the gut relates to autoimmune function and your immune system, and how
Ooh.
important your microbiome or your gut bacteria is to preventing you from getting sick, more or less, and aiding in your immunity. Because the only ways that we're exposed to bacteria are through our skin, right? It's things can be touching us. Have you ever been like, ooh, there's germs on there, I don't want to touch it because it's on your skin, right? And then the other way it gets into our body is through open orifices. So our nose and our eyes and your mouth. Those are the only open orifices, unless open whatever, or I don't know.
Orifice. Orifice.
Unless you have like a cut on your skin or something in your skin that would lead to an infection getting in that way, or bacteria getting in that way. The only way that they can enter your body is through these other holes. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about protecting yourself, especially, I know COVID's on the back burner for most people these days, but it's not the first and it's not going to be the last viral disease that's going to like slap humanity across the face,
Mm-hmm.
So these are things to just be aware of, because truly the best way to protect yourself is to know what is important to regulating your own body and what's important to keeping your body at a good level of immunity. And your gut, keeping your gut healthy, and the microbiome in your gut, the little bacteria in your gut, is the one of the biggest steps that you can do to heal yourself and to actually prevent yourself from having disease or illnesses. So your microbiome, which I've said a bunch of times, the microbiome it's actually referring to the billions of live bacteria that are living in your gut. And it's not just bacteria, it's also fungi and viruses and these little baby cells, right? So it's not just bacteria, it also includes fungi and viruses. And it's estimated actually that the gut contains 35,000 different strains of bacteria, which is 10 times more than the amount of cells that we actually have in our body. So there's more little bacterial cells, yeah, in
Oh
your
my
gut,
God.
in your microbiome, or microbiome is the gut bacteria. There's more of those in your gut than there actually are cells in your body, which I thought was really cool.
That's crazy.
Right? And the majority of these little bugs, these little bacteria, are found in your large intestine, particularly the colon. So the forefront of your digestion isn't even what's really protecting you, and like what's where those little bacteria lie. They actually lie in your gut, like far down, because your colon is the last stop for your digestion before it comes back out. So what does it do? What do these little bacteria do? You might be wondering. So we talked about the mouth and the enzymes that are secreted in your mouth, which we produce in our saliva. And we talked a little bit about the stomach and how the stomach will churn. And that's when you're like, oh, I can hear my stomach going. It's because your stomach is literally, I like to imagine like a washing machine where it's like, yeah. So your stomach is contracting and swirling the food around to mix it up with all of the acid that it's secreting. And so that's why some people will think that they need to take like an antacid or like an acid inhibitor type of medication. But really what they don't realize they're doing is inhibiting the ability of your stomach to really do its job. And if you're having the acid reflux, you should find out which foods are causing the acid reflux and maybe avoid those foods, or try some other methods of fixing your gut microbiome and maybe chewing your food a little better and stuff like that, instead of taking the medication. Because the FDA released a recall on a lot of these different medications. Protonix was one of them. Zantac was one of them, and which is like Prilosec or whatever. And there was a couple more. I think Miralax was one of them. So there's a bunch of,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, they say that the medication, it's still the pros and the cons, but it's to the point where they have to now include these different warnings. So before they wouldn't have to include, but then they found out that the medications can cause different problems, like up to including cancer and stuff like that. So they have to now include that on the drug list. But you
Always do your research on your
right, who really
medications,
knows
people.
that?
Like that's
Mhm.
so important.
If you're taking medications, don't just take them because somebody says something to you, and definitely don't just take them for life. Like find out if there's maybe like, you might need medications. Like I truly believe that's why I went into nursing, like that pharmaceuticals can be very beneficial for you, but they're kind of a short-term treatment so that you can
Right.
find out what the root cause to the problem is, so that you can hopefully get rid of that problem and prevent it from happening in the future. And then only use the medications when you have, setbacks, or use the medications when you really need to deal with the symptom management. But if you spend your whole life just masking the symptoms,
right, exactly,
it's going to progress, and you're going to lead to yourself having these more serious illnesses and more serious like diseases really later in life, or potentially side effects to some of these pharmaceuticals, because even the pharmaceutical companies disclose on like a lot of the prescriptions that you're not supposed to take them long term. So why is most of America on these medicines long term? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But hopefully this will help that. So getting back to your gut. So it's important for these bacteria to be in your gut to protect you, but also to digest the food. So after it goes from your stomach, it starts to be formed into little compact segments, and your stomach will start to release these little segments into your small intestine, and little bits at a time. And as it's secreted into the small intestine's like, oh shit, it's my turn. Okay, here we go. And it will start to secrete pancreatic enzymes. So your small intestine communicates with your pancreas, and it's like, yo, bitch, we need some of those enzymes, please. We having a party in the small intestine and we need it. Calling in reinforcements, right, to help digest the food. And your gallbladder is the other one that secretes some of these enzymes. And your gallbladder secretes bile and other digestive enzymes to secrete fat, or to help break down fats and lipids and all the different things that are in the foods that we eat, but can't be used in our body, broken down to be utilized in our bodies, right? So as much as food is fuel, it's only as much fuel as our bodies can break them down into. So sometimes I used to think like, why am I so hungry all the time when I eat like shitty foods? I used to think it was like the nutrition content, but I'm also starting to think now that maybe it was my digestive process was kind of messed up, where if you weren't eating the foods, or if I was stressed out when I was eating, even if I was eating good foods and I wasn't chewing them good enough, or I wasn't like giving my body enough time to digest them, you're only partially absorbing those foods if you're not helping in the metabolism.
That makes sense.
Right. So then when the food keeps going and it keeps progressing, which by the way, the total surface area of your gut is approximately the size of half of a badminton court. If you were to cut it open and lay it all side to side to side, a badminton court. That's freaking huge, guys.
I
Like,
knew it was huge, but damn.
yeah, or like a small studio apartment is another comparison if you don't know what a badminton court is.
Oh my
Yeah, like a
God.
small studio apartment is the equivalent square diameter of your digestive tract, your gut.
Crazy.
So I thought that was kind of crazy. And that's why diet has such an impact on our health. And we think that like the skin is the largest organ in the body, but really like our digestive tract is just as large, if not larger, because the skin, of course, it makes up our whole body, but the digestive tract is that big. So that's pretty crazy. And the integrity of our gut lining is only one cell thick. So although you could cut open and like space it all out, it's really just one cell thick, side to side to side to side to side. So when we eat foods that are irritating for our gut, it doesn't take a whole lot for the lining to break down because it's only one cell thick. So as soon as those
It's
cells,
literally tearing it up.
literally, right? So as soon as those cells start to dysfunction, and soon as those cells start to get irritated and to start to break down, and they get almost sick from the foods that we feed ourselves sometimes, like if we do too much of that, those little microvilli, those little they're kind of like little feelers, little boop, 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 boops that are in your digestive system, they're really like there to tell your gut like what to release. So they're there feeding back input to that little vagal brain center, being like, oh, this is the food we got in here, telling the vagal nerve to be like, go tell the pancreas that we need more enzymes because there's more of this fat, or we need more bile because there's more of this, or whatever, So that's how your gut communicates in and of itself and figures out what your body needs to metabolize and to get all that food to become fuel for you and to absorb it. So the small intestine does a lot of that secreting and breaking down. And then starting in the large intestine is where the food is actually completely broken down by those microorganisms. So that's where things I feel like get interesting. So in the large intestine, we want to have a balance of the good and the bad bacteria. And when I say like good and bad bacteria. What I mean by that is like, have you ever heard of like salmonella poisoning? You like eat chicken and you're like, oh, I can't eat raw eggs, or I can't eat raw chicken or raw meats because you don't want to get salmonella, right?
Everybody tells me not to eat cookie dough for that reason.
Exactly. They talk about salmonella poisoning. Well, salmonella is a bacteria, and it's a bad bacteria because it's one of the bacteria that will cause you to be sick. It is one of the bacteria that can cause an infection that is not good for your body. But there's good bacteria. There's bacteria that live in cohabitation with ourselves, that they eat the foods that we consume and break it down so that our bodies can use them for energy. If our gut lining gets damaged, then those bad bacteria can start to seep into our bloodstream, and then they can cause infections. So that's why people, when they have like different autoimmune diseases, they have to be really careful about the foods that they eat, because their gut might not be appropriate for protecting them, and their body might not have a nice defense mechanism of protecting them. But we're going to talk a little bit more about, I'm going to get into why the gut being broken down and the inflammatory responses of that, and how that can kind of cause, like, if we have different allergies or intolerances to different foods, how that can also break down the lining, not just in the digestive system, but then once it breaks down the lining, these things can start to leak through, like bigger proteins or bacteria, or just like unbroken down food particles. And when those start to go into the bloodstream, there's, on the other side of your digestive tract is the immune system waiting to be like, a little sniper, just like pew 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 pew. No, you don't get to stay. You don't get to stay. But if the immune system is going off, if there's damage to the gut lining, and there's bacteria or whatever else, foreign particles that normally would be too big to go through the one cell wall, the one cell thick wall, if that gets broken down, then things start to leak through. And when things start to leak through, it causes our body to have an immune response, right? Because if your body detects something as foreign, it's going to be like, oh no, we need to get you out of here so that you don't hurt the rest of the body. So it will cause an inflammatory response, an autoimmune response, because that's what our bodies do when we feel an infection, is we have an inflammatory response. And a cascade of different things will happen in your body when this reaction happens. Like, you might have a little bit of swelling, you might have like a fever, like the heat, like the inflammation can cause a variety of different responses. But all in all, what's important about that is just that it's your body's way of defending itself. So if you're eating foods that don't agree with yourself, then that lining gets broken down, and then your immune system gets triggered. But what's bad about this is that typically that's what triggers the immune system to go on, right? Typically there's a stop of that, and then your immune system would shut off. But if you're constantly eating foods that are irritating your gut lining, and you're not allowing for your gut lining to repair,
Me and
then,
hot Cheetos.
then your body is always going to be in hyperdrive. Your body's always going to be in autoimmune drive, not autoimmune, sorry, inflammatory drive. And it's always going to be fighting itself from the inside out. And that's when we see a lot of prevalence in these autoimmune diseases. 1 in 3 people now have an autoimmune disease in other countries, not necessarily in the United States, but in other countries. And it's because they're eating American diets.
Oh,
There's so many things that I didn't realize, like so many of these 5 ingredients that I'm going to list for you guys, that is literally like, I have had to throw away so many boxes and get rid of so many boxes of different products because I didn't realize there was soy in it, or I didn't realize that there was gluten in it, or I didn't realize that there was corn in it, or corn oil, or some sort of oil that's like, could be an irritant for you. So when I start to list some of these things, you're gonna be like, oh my God, it literally, if you start to read labels, you're gonna be like, holy shit, this stuff is literally in everything. And then you'll start to realize why the Western processed diet is causing these problems for people. And the reason I also bring it up about the immune system being so prevalent in your gut is because 70% of your immune system takes place in your gut. And the rest of it is, like we talked about, on your skin, in your eyes, and in your nose. And so having that lymphatic tissue in your gut be populated with the good bacteria and not be irritated by processed things or different food irritants that might be causing it to be broken down, and having that leaky gut. If you ever heard of like leaky gut, look it up if you haven't heard of it. But that is what is causing, or what is occurring so prevalently in our society right now, and it's causing people to have these different symptoms.
It's just going to add in when I first found out about lupus and all of that fun stuff that I've been going through, the first thing that I learned about was oils and fats and how to get my body to get out of the inflammatory state. So the first thing that I did was make sure that the only oil that I really use is like coconut oil and extra virgin olive oil. And that's pretty much all the oils that I can use.
You can look for olive oil that says that it's cold pressed. That's like the best olive oil out there. But so our gut isn't just for digestion. It's also helping with the mood regulation and serotonin production. And fun fact, there's 95% of the serotonin that's secreted in your body comes from the gut.
That's so crazy.
So
that's
we know
so
that.
Crazy.
I was like blown.
When you meet food people and they're just really food people, turns out we're all food people. That's where we're happy.
Literally, like we should all be a bunch of foodies. We should all be obsessed with what we put in our mouths. Like
100%. You know how much you could change just based off of what you're eating, like because of what we're learning here today.
So the immune response, and it also affects the predisposition to weight gain. So the bacteria in your gut, they serve a variety of functions, including breaking down food, metabolizing drugs, detoxifying us, helping the immune system mature, and helping regulate the immune system. And we talked about it. There's like 3 trillion gut bacteria bacteria in your gut, and there's 2,000 different strains of them in the gut. So when the good number of bacteria is up, then it supports those functions that I just listed. And when the bad bacteria outnumber the good, it can cause a dysbiosis, or that's what it means. Dysbiosis means a dysfunction or an imbalance in the gut bacteria. And over time, that can lead to what we talked about with the leaky gut thing. And now we can kind of get into what I've been doing to try to figure out what in my gut might be causing different inflammatory responses. So I've always been really sensitive to allergens in the air and pollutants and stuff. And I've always had, I mean, maybe not throughout my entire life, but throughout my majority of my adult life, I've known I've had allergies. So I would sneeze all the time. And every year I get like really bad, almost like sinus infections. And that's what I was dealing with 2 weeks ago when I recorded the episode about being sick. And I was like, what is my body trying to tell me? And I kind of came up with the, my next step of trying to figure out what my body was trying to tell me was to go on an elimination diet and to see, because, I consider myself to be pretty healthy when it comes to like, I move my body every day and like, I try to be aware of what I'm eating and stuff like that. But I was like, maybe I'm missing something, if I still have these really bad allergies and stuff, like I could be missing something. And the more I learned about my program, the more I started to realize that the symptoms that they were listing off are things that I've been dealing with. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe I do have a problem with something that, like an irritant. Maybe there is a food that I'm eating that is irritating my digestive system and is causing me to then have other problems. And so I started an elimination diet, and the specific foods that are related to the digestive system, they have like a long list of conditions that could be related to foods, including digestive problems, headaches, chronic sinus drainage, like if you have chronic migraines, chronic low energy, depression, mood swings, eczema, skin irritants, joint aches, asthma, weight gain. And then there's just a whole slew of other things, because they don't want to just categorize everything as problems. But like, those are just like things that normally, if you were to go to your doctor and be like, oh, I have like sinus drainage, they're going to write it off as like allergies. It's like, oh, I have low energy, they're going to write it off as this. They're not going to actually get to the root cause of that problem. And it has somewhat made it normalized in our society to be like tired all the time.
Right, exactly. Right? That's what I've actually like learned to just tell people like, hey, how's it going? Oh, well, I'm tired today, because people can relate to that. Isn't that insane?
For real.
Like, that's horrible.
Like chronic fatigue and like chronic depression. I know so many people who have like eczema and don't know what causes it, and it could be caused by food.
Like, yeah, that's crazy. I would have never put that together. And like with headaches too, like my first thought would have definitely not been related to food, but now that's got me thinking and the wheels are spinning. I'm like, wow.
Right? Like I want to tell my sister that, because she's had chronic migraines forever, and like none of the medications that she uses work. Like none of them help her.
Yeah.
And she's tried like everything under the sun to help her migraines, and nothing helps her. And I kind of want to be like, maybe you should try eliminating like some of these foods and see maybe if you have a food intolerance or a food allergy, or some sort of thing that's, disrupting your digestive system. And then is in turn causing some sort of other problem in your body that is like triggered. And maybe she doesn't know that there's a certain food that she eats and it triggers her migraines. And maybe she could
Right.
find out what it is that's triggering her migraines,
Right.
or
Through things like the
triggering your joint
elimination
pain.
diet.
And there's more and more autoimmune diseases being diagnosed all across the world because they don't know what's causing it. And it's like, this could be what's causing some of these problems. And, even with small kids and stuff like that, like there's so many babies and small kids that are being diagnosed with asthma and like different respiratory like ailments and different autoimmune diseases at such young ages, and like bipolar disorder and like mood disorders. The mood disorders are the worst. Like they
Oh,
think
that's
kids have like,
huge.
right, they're like diagnosing these 4 and these 5 year olds with like mood disorders, and little do we know that like it's really caused by gluten intolerance, and like there's too much gluten in all of our food. It's
Yeah.
literally in everything, because it's literally, gluten is like glue. It's the glue that keeps things together, and that's why it's used in so many baking products. But what you don't know is that gluten is also in things like salad dressings and, yeah, and like other boxed foods and other processed foods, because it holds things together. So it's like literally in everything. If you start to look
That's
at gluten
crazy.
products, and I know it was a fad, like gluten-free
Right.
living, it was
Mm-hmm.
such a fad, like in like what, like 2012 and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a fad for a reason, because when somebody figured out that this is what was causing all the problems, they were like, oh shit, let's do more research on this. And
Just like
now,
keto.
just like
I did the
keto.
keto.
And now, thankfully, there are so many good resources out there, some of which I'm going to link in the notes, for gluten-free things, because people have realized how much better their lives can be when they don't eat these foods that are irritating to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's just crazy
Yeah.
how that can help so much. So much of our health is determined by our gut bacteria and how well our gut bacteria flourish and function. And the immune system, like we talked about, 70% of the immune system takes place in your gut. So if your gut is damaged, it could be the reason why you get sick all the time. Like it could be the reason why you feel sick all the time, or you have low energy, or certain things like that. And so I was going to talk a little bit about what I've been doing to try to figure out what is my intolerances. And so far, like what I have seen as improvements are, my skin feels so much softer. And like I used to have to lotion up my skin like every single time. I mean, I know I came from Buffalo and like it was really dry there, but like I would have to, like, I'm always like getting out of the shower and like putting moisturizers on my skin and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
another thing to realize is that your skin is the other form of your immune system. So just keep in mind that what you're putting on your skin is being absorbed into your body. So try not to try to read labels and try not to be putting a bunch of chemicals on your body, right? Because like that could
Bad
also be
news
an
for Bath and
irritant.
Body Works.
Yeah, sorry, bad bath and blah, blah, blah.
Sorry, Bath and Body Works. You're going in the garbage or to
Like
the
for real,
donations.
like, or to, yeah, but it's like I want to donate this stuff, but I don't want to donate it so that what, poor people can poison their skin. Like,
Right,
do you
right,
know what I mean? Like it just
exactly.
feels terrible to like even give this like, oh, I don't use these fragrance perfumes. Like in my right conscience, I can't just give like my aunt or my uncles or my grandparents who don't know any better these perfume toxic whatever
Right,
things.
because you know, and you're trying to fix the situation,
Right.
not
I'm like, if I
donate to
just,
the problem.
yeah, if I just keep giving away my shit that I don't want, it's like, I don't want to just throw things in the garbage, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to be buying them anymore for sure. And I
Like it is
definitely,
garbage.
right. But like, it's like, I don't really want to be giving it to anybody either, because it's like, I don't want to encourage them to be using something that's toxic as well. And,
Right.
I know people know a little bit about like deodorant these days, and how deodorant antiperspirant, like the aluminum in deodorant,
Mm-hmm.
causes cancer, because when it absorbs into your lymphatic system in your armpits, it can cause blockages in your lymphatic system. So when you're thinking about the beauty products that you use, that's been a big challenge for me, is like looking at beauty products and trying to find things that don't have fragrances, trying to find things that don't have all these different chemicals, the sulfate chemicals, and like honestly knowing when you're reading a label, what the fuck do half of these chemicals even mean?
That is the first thing that I changed in my life when I started my spiritual journey, and I realized like how much your health goes hand in hand with this. That was the first thing that I did, is I started checking all of my beauty products, because your skin is very huge. So the first thing that I did was I got clean deodorant, I got clean makeup remover, I got everything clean that I possibly could. No synthetic anything, no phthalates, no parabens, no anything like
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
I've
And it
noticed a
takes a
huge
while,
difference too.
right? It takes a while to figure out like what you can use. Like for me, the biggest
Mm-hmm.
struggle wasn't necessarily like being like, oh, I don't want to use this anymore. I mean, for a couple of my beauty products, I was like, oh man, I can't use this anymore. But like for the most part, like I was like, oh my God, I'm struggling to find alternatives. I'm struggling to find clean products. And honestly, even a lot of the things that are marketed as like clean products still have like perfume and fragrances in them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
Like what? Just like everything organic that has like, if it says organic natural flavors, what the fuck does that mean? What
It
is an
means
organic natural flavor?
red flag. Red
Like
flag.
if something says natural flavors or fragrances and perfumes, it's not good. Okay. I promise you it's not good for your skin. It might not be as bad as like straight putting like some, chemicals on your skin, but like those are chemicals. Like they are, like they might, even in small quantities, like over time it's going to cause, you're going to be absorbing that into your skin. Like even things like sunscreen and stuff like that. Like you think sunscreen is so good for you because you're protecting yourself from UV radiation. Well, what about all the chemicals that you're putting on your skin? Like,
Mm-hmm.
do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, it's really like hard to figure out what's the lesser of two evils in some of these situations. And
Right.
honestly,
And
it's
like
like,
toothpaste too.
yeah, toothpaste is another one. Like having fluoride in your toothpaste is not good for
Mm-hmm.
you. Like fluoride is not good for you. And we think it
No
is because the government
fluoride.
puts it in our water and stuff like that. And like a little bit, sure. But like, and that's the other thing to maybe consider. A little bit of something might not be bad, but consider this. Like if I'm putting an extract in my body, it could like an extract of something, we've never put that much, that concentrated amount of something on our skin before. So it might not be the greatest thing to just be putting concentrated things on our skin. But I think we're looking for the olfactory, the nose stimulation in that,
Rose. Rose
right?
is a good example of that.
Is that because too much rose can be bad?
Yeah, it can irritate the shit out of your skin. It's
Mhm.
softening when used in very small amounts, but if I use more than like a little drop on my face, my whole face is red for like 3 days.
Yeah. So, I mean, just test your beauty products, like stay
Mm-hmm.
away from them for a couple of weeks and then just like try them again. Like if you use a skin lotion and it says fragrance perfume and you're like, I don't know what Julia's talking about. My perfume, my body lotion has never caused me to have problems. Stop using them for 3 weeks and then try to use it just once and like maybe a couple times that day, like go a couple weeks without it and then reintroduce it and see if you have a reaction to it. See if your body, after getting away from it for a couple of weeks, has enough time to kind of like re-neutralize itself and see if you have a reaction to it. Because sometimes you don't realize you're having a reaction because there's other symptoms that you're writing off as like chronic fatigue or asthma
Right.
or something else, right? Like,
Or just try doing things the clean way, try doing things the natural way, use
mhm.
those replacements and notice the difference. And that's what it took for me, because I always heard that Bath and Body Works lotion was not meant for skin, but I was like,
Mhm.
it's fine, I like it. And then I started using all natural, like really nice lotion instead, and I'm like, oh my god, like my skin doesn't look like it's reflective now and so greasy and like tight at the same time, but moisturized.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah, try some of these other products. Like you don't have to break the bank with some of them either. Like I use
Mm-hmm.
coconut
Yeah.
oil as my lotion. I use just like
Yeah.
organic coconut oil and I don't use it every shower, but like maybe once a week, I just like do a full body wipe down of coconut oil. And like you kind of have to be
Mm,
careful because it can rub on your clothing and like your furniture and stuff. So you're going to want to make sure you're like dry,
thin layer.
like it's all
Thin
rubbed
layer.
in. You don't really need a lot. A little goes a long way, but try that out and see if that helps and see if that's something that maybe your skin responds to a little bit better. And so going into the elimination diet, it's also about your beauty products. Like it's not just about your diet, it's about all things that you absorb into your body. And your absorption also happens on your skin level and on your hair level. That was the other thing. I went to the store today and I tried to find a conditioner without fragrances. I could not find one in the
I have
store.
to get mine online.
So
I
I'm gonna
have
have
to
to go
get mine
online.
online.
So I
Mm-hmm.
was curious. I was kind of curious. I was like, let me see. Let me just see if there's anything in the store that I could buy. Because I've been avoiding buying online because I'm in a different place. So I didn't want to have like something shipped to the wrong place, but I'm
Mm,
gonna have to. I'm gonna have
yeah.
to buy online because there was nothing. I could not
Mm-hmm.
find a single conditioner or shampoo in the store, in the grocery store, that did not have fragrances.
I'm going to make a recommendation, which
Yeah, go
is
ahead.
Function of Beauty. Function of Beauty, they have all these different options. It's custom for your hair. And not only
Mm.
that, you can pick each problem that you're having with your hair. That's beautiful. And you can buy it without dyes, you can buy it without fragrance, and you can buy it without all of the bullshit in it that we don't need.
Yeah. Yeah. So look into different alternatives, do your research, figure out what works for you. I know there's a bunch of different companies out there. So I like to think of like when I'm supporting those different companies that not only am I doing it because I want my skin and my body to be treated with the best products out there, but also because you're supporting like a business that you truly vibe with. So like
Yeah,
find out their mission statement, find out if they're a good company to support, like pay with your dollars, vote with your dollars, like
exactly.
not pay with your dollars, vote with your dollars. Support what you really believe, and then those companies will keep putting out those products. And tell your friends if you find something that you really like make it easier for each other. Like you just gave us a great recommendation. The more that we talk about this stuff and the more that we figure out what is really like good and reading between the bullshit lines, because gut health has become like the top talk these days. Like everybody's interested in your gut health and everybody's interested in these different things, because the more research that we find about it, the more we realize how integral our gut health is in our mental health, in our physical health, and just in how we function and how we feel every
Everything.
day. Right. So the more we learn about these things, the more that the science is there to back up what we're learning. But what we really need is for America to catch up and the product end to catch up and the producers to catch up with what the consumer should be buying and stop producing this
Exactly.
bullshit. Like put
Exactly.
Bath and Body Works out of business. Sorry, buddy, or get on the train. Like,
Exactly.
or
There's
start
another
making products that aren't
option.
toxic. Like, how about that? Like,
Hallelujah.
and it sucks that that's what's cheap, but eventually if they start to realize that people don't buy those products, then they'll go out of business and the products that are good will start to flourish, and maybe those prices will go down a little bit, or maybe it's
Yeah,
worth spending the extra $10 to keep you out of the hospital, right? Like
exactly.
buying better products and those types of things can prevent you from having like eczema and those different other problems with your skin and your alopecia, your hair loss and stuff like that. So that's just something to consider. And then, so with the food elimination diet and with the skin elimination, you would just want to get rid of as much of the toxic, irritating things that you can for 3 weeks. So the top toxic or the top irritating foods would be corn, soy, gluten, dairy, and oh shit, what's the fifth one? And eggs. And those are the top 5 irritating foods. So try pulling out those and try pulling out anything that you have that's like skincare products, like air fresheners is the other ones. Um, like we don't know how bad Glade is. I used to love Glade so much. And now I use my essential oil diffuser, right? Like I use products that are clean and they still smell good. And honestly, they make me feel 1,000 times better.
It's
Like,
better this way.
right? Like I used to walk in and I still do. Like being in the hospital for me is like the absolute worst for detoxing, because I'm surrounded by all of these different artificial fragrances because they have air fresheners all over the place because it just smells like shit everywhere, you know. And I have to Purell, I have to use hand sanitizer when I come in and out of every room, which you don't realize how toxic hand sanitizer is for your body. Duh. Like it's killing the
Yeah.
bacteria on our hands. We don't think it's killing our hand cells. And like, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's killing
Right.
off the good bacteria that lives on your body. Like, some of those things are actually good for us. Some of those bacteria are good for us. And so we don't realize that like when we're using different types of things like that, like I used to get such bad headaches when I would smell like bleach products and when I would smell different air fresheners and things like that would always give me headaches. And I'd be like, why is this giving me a headache? Because my body knew it was toxic. And it was like,
Because it
oh,
says,
oh, we don't like that, like that's not good. I don't like that. That gives me a headache. It's your body being like, this is not, no, this is a no for me,
that's your
so
red flag.
right. Start
It says,
listening to those no's and like seeing what is, once you remove these products for a couple of weeks, you actually, for the first couple of days when I started the elimination diet, I felt worse. And what I realized was I was detoxing from them and I was having withdrawal, specifically from cheese.
mm,
Because
mm-hmm.
what I learned about cheese is that cheese produces dopamine in the brain when you eat it, similar to
Yes.
how chocolate and like cocaine works in your brain. Yeah, literally similar to cocaine and sugar. And
That's my
so,
cheese.
right. So when you take dairy, which is where it comes from, cheese comes from dairy, obviously, and you get rid of all the lactose, which is what cheese, when you ferment it and you like make it into cheese, you get rid of all the lactose. So that's why some people who are lactose intolerant can have some dairy or can have some cheese because it doesn't have dairy in it anymore when you go through the process of making it into cheese. But what it does have is a condensed form of those enzymes. So when you take a bite of the cheese, you're getting all of those good things that, like, as a child, it was, this stuff is produced in milk because it soothes babies. We give babies
Mm-hmm.
breast milk, we give babies milk, and it
Mm-hmm.
soothes them because it has those enzymes in it. And it's for that reason, right? Those enzymes are for that reason, to give the baby nutrients, but also to calm them. It's a soothing mechanism. And that's just a natural thing that is produced by milk, produced by us and other animals that produce milk, right?
I
So when
remember
you
when I
go ahead.
first learned that, and I thought that it was the weirdest thing ever. It definitely changed my relationship with cheese for a little while, but we're back on good terms.
Yeah, so like anything else, like you can have it in small quantities, but I definitely had a craving for cheese for the 2 weeks, for definitely the first couple of days. And then I also felt like I was going through withdrawal, in the sense that I was having mood swings. I was so upset, like, about life. Like, I was depressed. I was just flat. Like, my affect was so
Yeah.
flat. I was just like, I don't want to get out of bed. Like, I just want to eat cheese. Like, I literally felt like I was withdrawing from it. I kept thinking about it. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is like a drug. Like,
Because
it's
it truly
insane.
is. It
Chocolate's the
is.
other one. Chocolate and sugar are like a drug to your brain, because when
Yeah.
we consume them in such high quantities than we've ever have before, we never used to consume
Mm-hmm.
what is it? A can of soda is like, what, eight ounces of sugar or something crazy like that. I forget how much the ratio is, but it's like, we've never
It's
consumed
ridiculous.
sugar in that type of a quantity before. Can you imagine eating by the spoonful like 8 ounces of sugar? Like, that's fucking crazy. But that amount of sugar is condensed into certain products or whatever when we eat them. It literally, like, they have scientific data now that shows where in the brain it sets off these little, like, certain parts of your brain are just like with the neurotransmitters firing in the pleasure centers of your brain. So it makes sense why we're addicted to these different foods, because it's literally going into our brain and producing these responses. So when you're like, oh, I can't help it, like, yeah, you really can't help it. Like, I understand now. And now it's like, knowing that, it's like, I don't know if it makes it easier or not to not eat the cake.
It's like it does and it doesn't, because then you realize you're like, oh, this really is bad, but also, is it?
Yeah. So, well, honestly, what I was trying to do instead was like have more of like the good, like, fruits and vegetables, like the good sugars. And
Right.
then see at the end of the meal, after I fill up on like the good fruits and vegetables, do I really even want the dessert anymore? And most times I'd be like,
Mm.
no. Sometimes I would, but then I'd be like, okay, well, that's fine. But let me just have like a couple bites. If I'm not hungry anymore, I just want a couple bites to give myself the dopamine, but I don't need to eat the whole thing, right? Like, because realistically, like, that might just make my stomach hurt anyway, because all that sugar, if you think about if we talk about again about the bacteria in our gut, those little microbiome, the good little microbes, the little bacteria in our gut, they consume fruits and vegetables and those fibers, and they break them down, and that's what we then absorb. So we need those bacteria to eat the fruits and vegetables. That's what if you ever heard of like probiotics and prebiotics,
Mm-hmm.
probiotics are bacteria, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
bacteria that you're putting into your body to support the microbiome, the gut bacteria. So
Pro.
when you give yourself probiotics, or you're trying to boost up your gut health, you want to consume the probiotics, but you also want to make sure that you're able to feed the bacteria that are in your gut. Because if you don't feed them, they're just going to die. And then the bad bacteria are going to take over. And that's when you get the digestive upset and stuff like that. So if you're feeding your gut bacteria and you're taking probiotics and you're trying to get your gut to flourish again, you're trying to get those microbiome up to a good count so that they can outweigh the bad bacteria, then it won't matter so much if you eat sugar, because the good bacteria eat the fruits and vegetables and eat the fiber and eat those different foods that we need to be broken down so that we can fuel our bodies with the enzymes that are made from those little bacteria breaking down the foods. But if we eat sugar and stuff like that, then we're really starving our good bacteria, because our good bacteria don't eat sugar. They eat fiber, which is found in fruits and vegetables. So when you feed your body sugar in large quantities and you're not consuming the fruits and vegetables, then you're only feeding the bad bacteria, because the bad bacteria, the viruses, they eat sugar.
Mm.
So that's really partially why you get stomach upset when you eat too much sugar and not enough of the fruits and vegetables and the other good foods, and too much processed foods and stuff like that, because you're not allowing for your good gut bacteria to be fed. You're starving them, and then you're feeding the bad bacteria. And then when sugar goes into your bloodstream, because after it gets digested and absorbed, it doesn't really need a whole lot to break down the sugar can be broken down by the enzymes that are secreted with the acid in your stomach and stuff like that. So they don't need the gut bacteria to break them down. So it just enters your bloodstream freely. So there's a lot more of it. And when you have a lot of high sugar in your bloodstream, that's when you develop things like diabetes, because your body then becomes sensitive to how much sugar is in your bloodstream. And the only way for sugar to leave your bloodstream is for you to use it with energy consumption. So to use it and like have your muscles be eating the sugar. So like to exercise and do stuff like that. Or insulin. When insulin is produced into your bloodstream, it's like a little lock and key going into your cells, and it goes knock, knock on your door. The sugar's knocking on your door, and nothing will let it in until insulin comes around, and it's like, oh, let me unlock that door for you. And it opens the door to the cell, and it goes into your cell, and then it gets stored as fat. So when you eat a lot of sugar, the insulin, your pancreas is working hard to produce insulin to get rid of the high levels of sugar in your bloodstream. Because if your bloodstream stays with sugar as a high level, it's a source for viral bacteria in your bloodstream to flourish, because the viruses in your bloodstream eat sugar. So they're like, yum, 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 yum. There's so much sugar here, and these cells aren't using it. So I'll use it instead. And then you end up with systemic infections, or you end up feeling sick, or you end up just feeling really lethargic, because your cells are being starved. Your good cells are being starved, and these bad bacteria are eating all that sugar. And if they're not eating all that sugar, then insulin is allowing for it to go into your cells, which is making more fat cells, which then causes you to feel slow anyway, because you're putting on more weight. Right. And when you put on more weight, you start to feel slower because you got a lot more to move around, and your body is not able to fight off and use that sugar, because your body's like, no, we actually need to chill out, because we don't have any energy now, because all of the sugar and all of that went into your cells. So then um, in order to use the fat that your body stores, you have to have a really low blood sugar. So you have to have low levels of sugar in your bloodstream for your body to use fat. So that fat's not going anywhere unless you get rid of the sugar. It's just going to keep building. And we've now learned that fat cells have their own little brains, and they they don't give a shit about the rest of the body. And they're just like, feed me, feed me, feed me. So if you're ever like, oh my God, I'm craving something and I don't know why I'm craving it, it's literally your fat cells craving things and being like,
Mm.
feed me. It's unfortunate that the only way that our gut says feed me is by hunger. But we need to know better when we're really hungry, or if we're thirsty or whatever, because there's no differentiation between hunger and thirst in your body. Your body's just like, oh my God, you're hungry. So adding water to my diet was a big thing with the elimination diet, because I realized I don't drink enough water. I'd be hungry all the time, and I'll have just eaten a meal and taken an hour to chew and doing all these good things, and then be like, oh my God, but I'm still hungry. And then I'll drink a glass of water and immediately be full and be like, oh, I guess I was just thirsty. Is that ever drinks water? Has that ever happened to you? Like, you're just like, oh my God, I need water.
All
So
the time. All the
that's a
time.
definite, like,
As a water drinker, yes.
yeah, like if you've learned anything if you take away anything from this, increase your water intake in meals. Maybe drink a glass before you eat your food. I always start my morning with a glass of warm lemon water, because the acid in the lemon will help start your digestive system and be like, oh, wake up, knock, knock, hello, rise and shine. Way better than coffee will be for your gut. That's like the hardest thing for me to eliminate, was the caffeine, honestly. I'm still struggling. And definitely, if you're going to try something like this with the elimination diet, get your doctor involved, just so that you can have a medical expert involved to make sure you're not
Yeah.
putting your body into a state where it's not healthy for you to be functioning that way. Kind of like when people just go on the keto diet and just think that like having free radicals in their bloodstream is fine for all the
Right.
time. It's like, please consult your doctor when you do stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or a
Yeah.
functional medicine practitioner is honestly the best person to do, because they know best how to do an elimination diet and how to coach you through this. And I mean, although I'm like, I'm learning these types of things to then be a resource for people to also try these types of things, I would still want you to have your doctor involved just to make sure you're
Mm-hmm.
having the proper tests done and stuff like that. And after you
Very
take away the
important.
foods, for a couple of weeks, you'll start to reintroduce them into your diet, like for a couple days at a time, one food at a time, and see if you have a reaction. So for me, when I reintroduced eggs, I didn't have a reaction. And like I eat really good eggs. I make sure they're pasture raised, and like I try to only eat like so much per day or whatever. But like that one I didn't have a reaction to. I had a reaction to cheese when I ate cheese again, but it was like a good reaction. I was just like, oh yeah. And then it like it wasn't too bad, but I noticed I'm a little sensitive to cheese. So if anything, it's just that I think like my body's a little sensitive. Like I think it might have something to do with my hormones, but I don't really know 100%. But what I do know is how I felt when I ate it, because I was journaling. Like I kept a log. So in my phone, I have like a daily log where I'll write down. I don't write down everything I eat. I only write down the things that I eat that are on that list. So if I have eggs in the morning, I'll put like 2 eggs in the morning. And then in the evening, I'll put like how I feel in the evening, or my bowel pattern. I'll put like, was it like a good movement? Was it soft? Was it gross? Like, could I kill someone with that? Like, like how is my digestive system functioning? And, just checking in every single day. And then after you do each food, you'll keep track, like I said, like of what's responding to you. And then, so like when I added eggs, I didn't have to cut eggs out again, because after having it for a couple of days, I realized that like I don't have an intolerance or an allergy or anything, any reaction to eggs, because I did it for 3 days. So they have like a 3 out of 3 rule that one of the programs talked about. And I'll list that one in the notes, but it said, do not include food causes symptoms unless symptoms occur within 3 days of eating the food, or occur consistently on 3 separate occasions after eating the food. So let's say like I ate eggs for 3 days straight, and like for all 3 days I didn't have any symptoms, and I'm only introducing one food at a time so that you can see for sure which food is causing you to
Right.
have the
Pinpoint
issue.
that shit.
Right. So then I added in soy at work yesterday, and I ate the most micro amount of soy. It was in a piece of chocolate. And it could have been the chocolate too. It could have been other chemicals. So that's the other thing you want to keep in mind. If you're reintroducing foods and it's not just the single food on its own, it might not be what you think it is. So make sure you're keeping track of like what food it is you thought was the issue, and then do that 3 rule. So like it had soy in it and it had chocolate in it. And today I'm like so crampy, and I'm wondering if it's the soy, because I haven't had soy in a really long time. And the way that I could probably test that better is if I just had like a little bit of soy milk or something like that, because it's a condensed
Right.
form, right?
Yeah.
And see how my body reacts to that. But as soon as you start to have a reaction to something, just take it out of your diet. Like stop eating it for now, because it's just clearly causing you to have issues. And then the next one that I reintroduced was corn, and I had issues with corn. I had a feeling
Really?
I was going to have issues with corn. Yeah, because is what predominantly fast food industries use to fry their food. So like I used to work in a restaurant, and we always used like the saturated fat, the canola oils and like the vegetable oils. And they use those because they're super cheap to buy, because we mass produce corn in this country and different starches like that. So when they use those oils for everything, it goes into the food, right? And that's what is entering your body. So even if you had vegetables that were cooked in that oil's on the food. So sometimes people think like certain foods will cause like upset, but really it's the friedness, it's the oils that are causing the upset. So I figured out that the corn was one of the ones, in like the canola oils, like I can't really consume them, because as soon as I did, I was crampy, and I felt like I was like straight up going to poop my pants. Like I was like, oh no, this is a no. My body says
Mm-hmm.
no.
That makes sense to me.
And even though my brain's like, whatever, my body's like, no. And I tried it for a couple of days to see how bad it would be. And it got really bad. So I was like, okay, yep, I'm going to have to cut this out of my diet. It's not worth it. It's not worth feeling bad.
Mm-hmm.
And now knowing how much it affects your serotonin production, and having like dysbiosis, having an imbalance in your gut, how much that affects the rest of your body. I'm like, okay, this really rationally, this can't be worth it. And the sugar and the caffeine was another hard one, but everybody's different. Some people might not respond to food in certain ways that other people do. Some people's food might be another people's poison. Like you
Yeah.
never know. So
I love
I'm
hot and spicy food, but that's
Mhm.
something that I had to kill out of my diet because it made me super inflamed and it really sucks. So now I just use my spicy foods in very light moderation.
Yeah, and when you have that, when you re-regulate your system, you're able to then have some of the foods that you have a little bit of an intolerance to, because what you find out is that when you eliminate them from your diet, your body has a chance to re-regulate itself. And then you incorporate probiotics and lots of water, and you basically like flush out your system and do like almost a detox so that your body can get back to normal. And then it can handle having a little bit of irritant in your digestive system because the cell wall fixes itself. It repairs itself. So when the digestive lining repairs itself, then it's strong again and it has the ability to be like, get out of here. No, no, we don't want you. And that little bit of inflammation that you might feel might be worth it to have that piece of pizza or whatever, those chicken wings that you want from your favorite place, because that's where they use fried oils, or maybe it's enough motivation to be like, let's make our own chicken wings. Let's make our own pizza.
Exactly.
Like, let's make this in a way that we can enjoy it and it will be beneficial for our health. Like, that's the
There's
goal.
always
That's truly the
alternatives.
goal. The alternative is like, right, like finding something that works for you. And it can be really difficult if you eat with a partner. Like, if you're constantly cooking for another person, that can be really difficult to do an elimination diet. And like, maybe both of you should try, and see. And maybe both of you have different intolerances, which could be difficult because then you have to cater your food preferences, right, to like what each other can or cannot eat, what they can or cannot tolerate.
It is
And
difficult, but it can be done as long as you
Mhm.
are persistent about it. If
Yeah.
you are determined to get something done, there is a way. I've tried it with my own husband because he really, really loves sugar. Everything about that man is sugar, and my body cannot tolerate it. So there are things that I will not add in to my portion of the food, but I will add it into his because I know he'll complain. But either way, you can get
Yeah.
it done. It's just
Yeah.
a little bit of a chore.
It can be challenging, but it can also be really worth it. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out like, and then being aware of it is like, I feel like the most important thing to take
Yeah,
away is
just being
like,
conscientious about things.
right, like instead of just being like, oh my God, I'm so depressed after eating that thing. Like, alcohol is one of the worst things. It was so easy for me to be like, I don't need to drink, like, until it was
Mm-hmm.
St. Patrick's Day and I was like, oh, I kind of do want to drink. And I was like ill. That was actually the day where I was so ill. And I had like 2 beers, and part of that's the gluten. So part of
Uh-huh.
that's like the gluten in the
Yep.
beer. And then the other part of it was the alcoholic part of the beer. But I can like consume kombucha and that doesn't irritate my belly, but that's because it's probiotic version and it's fermented tea. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't affect my body the way that beer does. And for some people, beer might not affect you, or maybe you have resources like, I know they have like some really good cultured beers these days. Like, there are some like really good products out there that people are taking extra efforts to make it so that different products are not irritating your digestive system and you can find
Building
like
a
good
better
beer.
United States.
Right. So maybe spend that extra time to just like figure out what it is that you might have intolerances to, or just try out different things to see what, if it feels better when you have like this other type of beer or this other type of hand lotion, or just test the waters and see what works for you, because we're all different. And this stuff with our gut goes back as far as your birth. The way that you're born affects your gut microbiome. If you're born vaginally or C-section affects your gut microbiome, because the
Really?
bacteria, yeah, because when you're born, you come through the vaginal canal if you're born vaginally, and your mouth comes out open towards the mother's rectum, which is where her bacteria are. There's bacteria on your rectum, right? And that's the baby's first exposure to bacteria is through the mother's gut bacteria and through her vaginal bacteria, and it goes right into the baby's mouth. Like, there's natural way, like nature's like already setting them up for a healthy gut by saying like,
Okay.
here's exposure to mom's gut bacteria, because the baby needs to have exposure to start to build its own bacteria,
That makes a lot of sense.
right? So when you're born via C-section, you're born through your mother's abdomen. They're cut open, and then you're pulled out through the skin. So you don't get the exposure to those bacteria. So that
Hmm.
actually puts you at risk for different digestive issues and like immunity issues, because you don't have that gut bacteria. And then there's other ways, like if you're breastfed, if you're not breastfed, because there's the
Right.
antioxidants and the different everything that comes from the breast milk that is good for the baby's immunity and different things like that. So it starts from when you're a baby. And by the time you're 3 years old, you have developed and cultured all of the microbacteria that are going to be in your gut. So by age 3, your gut bacteria is done developing. So everything that you do up until
Huh.
that time is developing their gut.
That's crazy.
So if you're
That's
feeding, right? So what you're
that's
feeding
good
your kid,
information to know for like some moms out there that are raising kids.
yeah, like the first 3 years of their life is the most important for their gut bacteria. And it's actually what's going to set them up for the best immunity possible. So feeding your babies like lots of colorful foods because they've learned that phytonutrients, which phytonutrients are, you know how plants have colors?
Hmm.
Like blueberries are blue and radishes are like this red purple and lettuce is green. That's the phytonutrients. The phytonutrients are the
Mm.
colors that make up fruits and vegetables. And they're learning that those phytonutrients actually play a role in your gut health. And the phytonutrients are what those, remember we talked about the microbiome? That's what the microbiome eats, is partially the phytonutrients.
Oh.
Mhm.
Huh.
So when you eat fruits and vegetables that are colorful, you're eating the rainbow, they call it. Like that's actually how you're feeding your microbiome, your microbacteria in your gut. And so that's like a form of probiotic or a probiotic support is to feed yourself like lots of fruits and vegetables, because now knowing that phytonutrients is what they eat, the fiber in the fruits and vegetables as well, but the phytonutrients is the biggest part of that. And it can only be found in fruits and vegetables. But what we're learning is that because of our agricultural changes and everything that we have that has shifted in the United States, especially as far as like farm fresh foods, the food, by the time we get the food, we're only getting like a very small percentage of the phytonutrients and of the proteins, unless you're
Hmm.
getting your food within 30 miles of where you live. So
Shop local.
supporting, right, shopping local, supporting local farmers markets, like supporting local produce is really the best way to heal your gut microbiome, because you're giving it those high doses of the phytonutrients of the fruits and vegetables that are going to support your gut health. Way to rebuild your gut microbiome is to get rid of those foods that are irritating that we talked about, the corn, the soy, the gluten, the eggs, and the dairy, and to start allowing for your gut to heal itself by giving it good sources of phytonutrients, whole foods, especially foods that are high in like the good proteins, probiotics and prebiotics. You can take supplements, just do your research, because probiotics and prebiotics are not FDA regulated. And a lot of them think like a lot of companies will broadcast that they have good probiotics, but if by the time you get like the shelf life on those, because they're living organisms, if you don't get them from a fresh source, then by the time you actually receive them and you're putting them in your body, most of the bacteria are dead in the
Mm-hmm.
probiotics. So that's not really helping you at all. So people are like,
Are
"Oh,
those
probiotics don't work for
refrigerated?
me." Yeah, they're supposed to be, because they're bacteria.
Okay.
Honestly, the best way is to just make your own probiotics, like kefir, sauerkraut,
Oh,
pickles, like yeah,
what?
yogurt.
Okay.
Yogurt is good, except that yogurt, you want to have the sugar, you want to watch the sugar content in yogurt, because typically yogurt will be so much sugar that it's not even worth the probiotics. So
Yeah.
just keep an eye on like what kind of culturing you're getting from your probiotics. Like kombucha is a good one. Like there's lots of different ways to support that probiotic, or to use like different types of probiotics to support your microbiome. And then, yeah, once you figure out like what is irritating to your body, avoid those foods. Only eat them in small quantities, moderation, right? Doesn't mean you can't enjoy your pizza and your wings and stuff like that, but maybe just do it in smaller quantities so that you're not just like feeling like shit all the time. And after eliminating everything from my diet, I started to like I don't sneeze as much anymore. Like I still have a little bit to go because I'm still trying to cut out the caffeine. And yesterday and today were the first days I didn't have any caffeine. So yeah, but I'm just going to start doing it in small quantities and seeing how my body reacts to it, and having more motivation based on how I feel and feeling really good, and just like using that as like your way to find balance. And yeah, everybody's different, so what's going to work for you is not going to work for everybody else, and your balance is going to look different from Faith's balance and my balance. So just try to be patient with yourself as you're figuring it out, and keep a log of it so that you know what really does and doesn't work for you. And thank you so much for listening to my rampage about gut health and how these different types of things being aware of this information can help you build your immune system, boost your immunity, and ultimately, prevent yourself from feeling like crap all the time and feel good instead.
Well, thank you for teaching us today, Julia. I learned some very fun new things.
Yeah, enough fun facts for today. We'll be back soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye.